Welcome to The Jewish Lens, a podcast to discuss anything and everything from a Jewish perspective. Now, please help me welcome the man who controls the media, your host, Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and today I'm thrilled to welcome someone with an unbelievable resume. He's been the president of production at RKO Pictures, where he oversaw such films as Hamburger Hill and 8 Men Out. He was president of programming for Showtime networks, where he was responsible for such series as The Outer Limits, Stargate, and Queer as Folk. He started his own production company, Parkchester Pictures. He's won many awards, and most importantly, he's a fellow New Yorker. Please help us welcome Jerry Offsay. Jerry, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. I'm glad we're here.
Yes, me too. Well, we have a lot to cover, but I like to start by going back to you. I know we interviewed you over at Pop Culture Rat Show, and you were kind enough to join me here as well. But I want to start with some things that I didn't get to there. So I know you're from New York, but I like to start by asking around which area did you grow up, and what was your family life like, in particular with regard to Judaism?
Okay. So I'm going to move this in a little bit. So I grew up in Parkchester. In fact, my email is Parkchester Pictures, because you can take the boy out of the Bronx, but you cannot take the Bronx out of the boy. So it's a constant reminder. Of course, if I knew that I wasn't going to have an assistant the rest of my life, I would have taken a shorter email address to type into all those things.
Right.
Than Parkchester, Jerry Offsay at Parkchester Pictures. But Parkchester was an interesting place to grow up. It was about 2/3 Irish and 1/3 Jewish when I grew up. And I went to Hebrew school for 4.5 years. I went to junior congregation every Saturday morning. From there, my mother would pick me up, and she and my younger sister and I would go out to Great Neck to have lunch with my grandmother for Shabbat. It was, we had a kosher home.
Oh, yeah.
But we were not kosher outside the house. Could eat whatever you wanted outside the house. And sometimes when my parents went out and we wanted to bring food in, we would turn the tablecloth over and eat on paper plates.
Right.
We had two sets of dishes. We had 2 sets of silverware. And I never had to, bury it in the earth like Buddy Hackett did.
Right.
But
yes.
I'll share that story with you later. Parkchester was, my parents decided that since I was born in December and my bar mitzvah wouldn't be till December, that if I had started Hebrew school at 8 with my friends, I would be finished in June. And then I would have to, have some sort of continuing classes for which there really wasn't any in my Temple Emmanuel in the Bronx. And so they decided that they would save a year's worth of educational money and start me a year after all my friends. What they didn't think about was that they started me a year after all my friends were busy at Hebrew school 2 days a week for the first year. But the year that I started, I was busy 2 days during the week. We had a third day on Sundays, but during the week, I went Mondays and Wednesdays. All my friends who were a year ahead of me went Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I literally had no one to play with from about the time I was 9 until I was 12. All because they were sending me to Hebrew school strategically a year later. Now, that resulted in the fact that they had promised me that I could stop when December came. And when December came, my birthday was December 13th. My bar mitzvah was going to be December the 24th. On the 20th of December, or the 22nd of December, which was a Thursday, the rabbi called me into his study to talk about my bar mitzvah. We were pressed because we were going out to Great Neck to do my Haftorah for my ailing uncle. And so it wasn't a great time to have this conversation with me, but the rabbi said, I can't believe you're going to leave Hebrew school here. You have half a year left to go, and you're going to be the valedictorian of the Hebrew school.
Oh, really?
That will go on your permanent record. And of course, if you drop out, that will also go on your permanent record. And I don't know if you remember, but anything that was going to go on your permanent record was like a boogeyman.
Right.
If you did
Start
something,
sweating.
if you did something bad, they told you if this could be on your permanent record card. So I spoke with the rabbi for an hour, at which time my mother was waiting outside with the car. It was time for us to go to Great Neck for something that actually is one of the seminal moments in my entire life and in my Jewish life. My uncle was 53. He was the patriarch of the family. He was the person that my parents borrowed money from when my dad's business was in trouble. Excuse me, I lost my back support here. And he was dying of cancer. And he was no longer able to get out of his bed. And so I drove out to Great Neck with my mother, where my grandmother lived with my uncle. And I did my Haftorah in his bedroom for him with the sound of my mother, my grandmother, and my aunt, my uncle's wife, weeping in the background.
Nice.
It was a trial run for what was my bar mitzvah 2 days later on Saturday. And since the train, the temple backed up to the L, it was expected that a train would go by during the Haftorah and distract you, having the sounds that I had in the background more than prepared me for, and I did have a train come through about 40 seconds after I started my Haftorah, which they had told me to stop and wait for it to pass. But once you're into it, and once
you just go, right.
Once the adrenaline's going, there was no way that I was stopping for that train. My uncle died 8 days later on New Year's Day. And he was buried the next day. And there's one interesting side story about that. When my uncle died, there was a gravedigger strike on in all New York, Nassau, and Suffolk. But my uncle's best friend, Bernie, was the head of the Sanitation Workers Union. And so the only man buried in the 5 boroughs and on Long Island on January the 2nd of 1967 was my uncle, Max Aronauer. I was in the car behind the limousine. My mother, my aunt, and my grandmother, the 3 people who had been the witnesses to my Haftorah, were in the limousine with Bernie. Bernie got out, and he reached into his pocket like this, and he took out a big white envelope. The gates to the new Montefiore Cemetery on Long Island were locked. There were 4 guys who looked like they came out of Central Casting standing behind it, big, bulky guys, probably packing. They opened the gates. They talked to Bernie. He handed them the envelope. They all shook hands. They let our cortege in.
Wow.
And then presumably they closed the gates right behind us, because on the way out, we had to wait for them to unlock the gates to let us all out. My father, who was very, very moral guy, the most ethical man I ever met, had always said that, at the eulogy that day, my father said about my uncle that he gave it, but he was the brother-in-law. He wasn't the blood relative. My mother was in no shape to give a speech that day. My father said that my Uncle Max was the finest man that he ever met. As a 13-year-old kid, hearing that had an enormous impression on me. It's influenced me every day since. The notion that to come to the tragic end that he did, but
Right.
have somebody say about him what my dad said about him. And so it's my dad had always objected that the one thing he said that was bad about my uncle is that his best friend was a union leader and probably mobbed up to his eyeballs. And how can you be best friends with this guy, Max? And then, at the moment that it was most needed, my father had to admit there was some benefit in having that
Having
kind
that
of,
involvement.
yeah, that involvement there.
So I want to ask you, though, because one of the things that fascinated me, and you were involved in, because I love this movie, 8 Men Out. All right. And we spoke a little bit, I spoke last time. But so I know you grew up a baseball fan, probably for the wrong team we discussed. But so great movie, riveting story. So how familiar were you ahead of time with the 1919 Black Sox scandal before that movie? Were you very familiar with all the
Totally.
legend?
I had read probably all the books that had been written about the Black Sox scandal. And when the script came in, I had only one thought, which is, God, it's hard to get a baseball movie made, but this is my dream come true kind of thing to try and get done. And we were in the midst of I don't know if I said this in the other podcast or not, so forgive me if I'm repeating myself.
No, not at all.
But we were in the midst of a management buyout of RKO. And we initially said yes to financing the movie, and we were going to put it together the way we normally put the pieces together, which is sell the FAR and sell the video, which was a new medium at that time, put the rest of it up in equity ourselves, and get a distribution deal. We had a first look deal with Paramount. But once we had signed the papers to buy the company, they froze our ability to finance anything. So we're basically just a producer for hire like anybody else because we couldn't put any equity in. But fortunately, Orion had agreed to distribute the movie with us financing it. And when we went back to them and said, you know what, we have good news and bad news for you. Instead of you just getting, U.S. rights and not even getting the video rights in the U.S. because we were selling them to a company called Vestron, you can have all the rights worldwide, but you have to put up all the money. And after a while, Mike Medavoy agreed, and we went forward, and we were just producers. My partner Barbara Boyle was there on the set, and I was locked in conference rooms with lawyers, bankers, and accountants doing the management buyout. So I never made it to the set of 8 Men Out.
Oh, I was going to ask that. Now, during casting, I'm just curious there, because I remember, did anyone look for actors who could play baseball, or that's not important when you're doing a film like this?
So let me, can we take a little tour since you were talking about rooting for the wrong team?
Absolutely.
So, we've settled finally into our new house here in the Palisades.
Oh, you told me that, right? You were going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a feeling I'm about to be nauseous,
Jerry.
Jerry.
I misstated. Our new house in Brentwood. And we built a gym. I don't know what this thing is that just came up on my computer, but I hope I can get rid of it. Can you see me okay? Yeah.
I can see you, yeah.
Okay. So we're going to go into the gym, and
I know we'd be getting a tour. Oh, I think I already see things. Okay, yes.
Oh,
I see.
no, let's change the angle maybe on this.
I'm getting it. Yeah, I see it.
There's a 1961 Yankee team over there. every player. There's the entire wall of Yankees, including in the upper left-hand corner, that's me, my two older sons, and Mickey Mantle. Next to it is the picture, that signed picture Mickey sent me on my 36th birthday when my boss made me cancel my dinner with him. Now, on the other wall,
So you had dinner with Mickey Mantle?
what's that?
You had dinner with Mickey Mantle? Hello?
Is we'll talk about in the next issue of Pop Culture.
Right.
But you could see that I heavily devoted to that team. I made the Joe Torre bio movie at Showtime. I am a dyed-in-the-wool Yankee fan since I was. Talk about growing up in the Bronx when the Yankees lost the '60 World Series. I took my 1,000 baseball cards, which I had accumulated as a 6-year-old, and I scaled them out the window of my parents' sixth-floor apartment.
Wow.
I wish I had those back because they
Of
probably
course.
would have paid for my first year of college.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So, anyway.
So you had dinner with Mickey Mantle?
I was supposed to have dinner with Mickey Mantle on my birthday.
Okay.
But we had after my management buyout of RKO, it changed hands twice before I left, and the last one, the last the owner until he died, was a guy named Ted Hartley, who was married to Dina Merrill, the richest woman in America at the time. And I had gotten Ted and Dina to contribute money to the charity opening of the movie Enemies: A Love Story, which I had in a brief interlude at a company called Morgan Creek, where I was supposed to be the president. I had been in the greenlight meeting for that movie with Jim Robinson and Joe Roth, who were big names in the movie business, and they were partners, and I was going to be their president, and we greenlit 3 movies in there, one of which was Major League, one of which was Skin Deep with John Ritter as a womanizer.
I remember that movie.
One was Enemies: A Love Story.
Right.
And so Enemies: A Love Story was premiering, and I had bought tickets, and Dina and Ted and I and my wife were going to sit next to Jim Robinson, the founder and financier of Morgan Creek. And I said, well, we have this deal with Mickey to do a baseball movie, and he's coming to town, and it's my birthday, and I'm supposed to have dinner with him, and I can't come. And Ted, who was notoriously frugal and parted with this charitable donation under significant duress, despite the fact that Dina was the richest woman in America, said, you can't go to that. We bought these tickets. I don't know Jim Robinson. You have to come here. So the next day, the producer who had brought me the project for the Yankee movie sent me he had Mickey was going to give me this picture at my birthday dinner, and so it says on it, happy birthday, Jerry, Mickey Mantle. The movie that I worked on with them was it was a baseball fantasy camp movie, for which I had significant interest from Rob Reiner to direct, but they were developing their own fantasy camp movie at the time, and not about baseball, but about guys going off and doing the fantasy thing. And that turned out to be the Billy Crystal movie.
City Slickers?
City Slickers, yeah.
Wow, okay.
And so, I sat there for 6 months waiting for them to get that draft in, with them saying, if the draft is no good, then we'll do this baseball fantasy camp movie. Rob would love to do that. But if it is good, and I never got that fantasy camp movie made. It was
wow.
It was written by two guys, a guy named Stu Black, who was the host of the show, one of the original hosts of Sports Central on ESPN, and Phil Berger, who was the boxing writer from for the New York Times. Up on that wall that I showed you is a season-long invitation to the original 1923, the opening of Yankee Stadium, which when Stu Black died, his sister came over and gave me as a gift.
Wow.
Because she thought I would want to have it. So this has nothing to do with Judaism. We're on a baseball tangent, except that most Jews in the Bronx were Yankee fans.
Well, I'll say the whole podcast does not have to do everything with Judaism. It's like I interview people who interesting Jews. We'll put it that way. The content can be whatever.
Okay. So the Yankees are a big part of my life. I watch every game still.
I watch every game too. I watch every Met game. So yes.
Well, my condolences.
Yeah, I know. I definitely need it right now.
My best friend Alan Zverin is a huge Met fan, and he suffers along with them. But because he went to college with a group of mostly Yankee fans, and because he's just a baseball fan, I think he watches most of the Yankee games as well.
Oh, that I can't do. I can't. I just interviewed yesterday Art Shamsky, so it was.
Cool.
That was fun. That was a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, good for you.
I have to ask though. Okay, so just in your opinion, should Shoeless Joe go into the Hall?
Well, Shoeless Joe should definitely go into the Hall. He did no wrong. He took no money, and he hit 360 something. Yeah. The only thing you could accuse Shoeless Joe of doing is not turning in the people who approached him to throw it. And I don't think that, he had a legal obligation. He may have had a moral obligation to do that, but I wouldn't keep a guy with his record out of the Hall at all. Say it ain't so, Joe. Say it ain't so. I've used that line a lot of my kids. And, the first two movies I got executive producer credit on were a movie called Hot Pursuit that starred John Cusack, and 8 Men Out that starred John Cusack. Right. And I haven't worked with John Cusack in the last 40-something years or whatever, but that was the beginning. I did work with Charlie. And Charlie and Emilio did a movie together for me, which Emilio directed, about the Mitchell brothers in San Francisco, a true story.
How was that? How was working with them?
Well, working with Emilio was fantastic. Really, I loved him. I'm sorry that we didn't do more together. We tried maybe a little something, but nothing of significance after that. But he directed that movie. He did a great job. We took the movie to Sundance. We premiered it there. And then we thought we were going to get offers to buy it from us. And we did, but they weren't enough to pay back our investment. So we put it on Showtime. We got huge press because the story is about ultimately one brother killing the other. And so you can imagine the drama at the end of that. And Charlie played the wilder of the brothers that had, gotten so out of control.
What a reach.
Yeah. But he was terrific to work with. He did all the press stuff. I remember walking before we had a giant party in Sundance, as we did every year. I had 27 movies selected to play in the Sundance Festival during my Showtime years, which, is for me one of the great honors of my career to, and I remember, discussing, and they weren't always the ones that I thought should get in, or, the day after Thanksgiving every year, I would have a conversation with Jeff, who ran Sundance, And I had one like 2 months before to discuss all the movies we were submitting and why I thought they fit the Sundance model of being an edgy, independent film. And then, the day before Thanksgiving, they would announce it. And so the Monday afterwards, I'd call and talk to Jeff Gilmore, and we'd have a postmortem. And, a lot of the ones that they picked were not the ones that I had said, I thought should be in the festival. And it was interesting to hear their point of view, because what they did was independent film. And, some of the things were too mainstream. Some of the things they thought you could see on a network TV. They didn't have the right indie cred as in terms of actor or filmmaker, even if the subject was indie. And they particularly wanted people who it was their first film, because you always got more press coverage for that. But, nevertheless, I had 27 films go to Sundance. And Charlie and Emilio's film was there. And before the party, we walked the length of the town and back down. And, 20 women came up and approached Charlie. And he was completely straight and sober. And he and Emilio and I had a great conversation, and then we went and did the party. And Ted Hartley, the guy who had I mentioned before, who ended up as the RKO owner, and I think died earlier this year at like 100 or 101, he tried to crash the party. Every year he was not on my list. And every year he would say that he would show up and say he was my mentor. And he had a Harvard MBA, and he'd been a jet fighter pilot. So he's kind of and an actor. If you watch Ice Station Zebra, he's standing next to the commander on the bridge in the picture. So he was not a shy fellow. And he would say, but I was Jerry's mentor, and I'm, how can I not be on the list? Of course I'm on the list. And the head of PR would come find me in the party and say, Ted Hartley's at the door. Do we let him in? And I'd say, sure.
Oh, wow. I got to tell you, first of all, I'm a huge Charlie Sheen fan, and it's like the guy has screwed up so much, but it's like he takes ownership of it now, at least, and that's good to me. And he says what's going on. But I think he's so talented, very charismatic, and he's just you just root for the guy, even though no matter how many times he's done something wrong, you still root for. And I'm friendly with people who would in 2.5 Men, who involved with 2.5 Men. And he did make their life hell, but it's like...
Yeah. I mean, fortunately, we never had anybody act out like that in any of the movies or TV shows I worked with. But, we did ban some people from working with us again after we had worked with them. And we did have to send up on one set a VP to protect the women from being harassed by one of the actors. So he was the first name put on the we called it the Life's Too Short list. And, we're never working with him again. And somebody, would bring him up for a second or third lead in the movie. And, my casting lady knew, Beth Klein, to say, nope, Jerry's never going to approve that. Forget that idea.
This is usually the time when I start asking, and the name rhymes with, but I'll let it go. So I want to go back.
Let's just say it's somebody who has several brothers in the business.
Oh, now I'm going to be guessing all night now. Osmond, of course, but no. Okay. I want to go back to one thing that you mentioned. Now I got to ask. So you were involved with Major League also, or no?
Yes.
You were involved with Major League. How did I not know that? So what?
Yeah, but so the way I was involved. So this guy Jim Robinson founded a company with Joe Roth, who's one of the great studio heads of of our generation, ran several companies, and I had been Joe Roth's lawyer tangentially, but I was the way Joe Roth and Jim Robinson met was Joe was making his directing debut on a movie called Stone Boy, and I was representing Jim, who was co-financing it with, I think it was New World Pictures at the time. And it was a testy negotiation. And studios generally think that people who co-finance money, the terms that they initially propose for giving it back, well, we'll each put in a half, and we'll take 30% off the top for distributing, and we'll take back our advertising with a 10% bonus, and then we'll take our money back first with a 10% interest, and then your money will come. And I frequently used, when I was a lawyer and negotiating, that the phrase, my client's money is not money of the Confederacy, it's actually real dollars and entitled to be treated as close to yours as possible. So, in that deal, we ended up with the studio taking a 12.5% fee, not a 30% fee, and no overhead on their advertising, and the money coming out side by side. But that took several months, and they were ready to start the movie. And this was one of the two last deals that I worked on before I left to go to RKO. But having been Jim's lawyer, when I left, we stayed in touch and we talked about RKO and Morgan Creek co-financing movies, and that didn't work out. But after the buyout, when I realized that my initial partners in buying the company, a group called Westray, who were $40 million ahead on the day that we closed the contracts, and who had promised me the $40 million to use to finance movies, but then told me that I'd have to find third-party money, and they weren't going to put their money in. Jim Robinson had already made two movies at Morgan Creek. They had done Young Guns, and they had done Dead Ringers, a Cronenberg film. And I had done Hamburger Hill, and the company that was selling the international rights to all three of those movies was a company called PSO, which had been my client. I had a very nice independent film financing practice before I gave up being a lawyer. So I was in Cannes. Well, so they approached me in January of we finished our buyout in December of 1987, and in January of 1988, Joe Roth came to me and said, Jim and I have big plans to expand the company. We're going to do 5 or 6 movies a year, and you've represented both of us. We trust you, and we'd like you to be the president of the company.
Wow.
And we'll hire a couple of business affairs guys, and they'll do the deals, but you'll supervise the deals because you know how to do deals, but you'll be our partner. And I was supposed to have 12.5% of Morgan Creek. That was what was agreed on, except they would keep Young Guns and Dead Ringers in a separate company. We were going to form a new company that had 3 owners. That negotiation went on for 5 months. During those 5 months, I didn't really have that much to do at RKO. I mean, I was trying to set up movies that other people would finance. I had the whole RKO library available to me, and I put 20 projects in development at studios during that period of time. But, it takes years to get scripts written, and I was going to be the executive producer of those movies. There were only 4 of us left at RKO out of the 80 people who would work for me. There were 6 because we still had a little video division. So basically I'm out of business, getting paid a salary, as part of my deal to have sold the company to this one of the first of the hedge funds, Westray. And So I would go to my RKO office from 8 or 8:30 until 3 o'clock. And then from 3 to 7, I went to Morgan Creek and I worked with Joe Roth and his assistant. And we were like the only three people in the office. Jim Robinson lived in Baltimore and he came to town, every other week and was chauffeured around in his Daimler limousine. Jim died a few months ago. And I think around 90 he was. He was a very interesting character, one of the smartest men I ever met. He sold a Toyota distributorship he had for, $100 million or whatever, and decided he wanted to be in the movie business. So during those 5 months that I was acting president of Morgan Creek and president of RKO, we greenlit 3 movies, the three of us, and those 3 movies are the ones that I said before: Major League, Skin Deep, and then come the weekend after Memorial Day, I got a draft of my proposed contract at Morgan Creek, which had been written by my old law partner who took over representing Jim Robinson from me when I left, and it did not in any way reflect what the handshake deal we had made in January was. Okay. No, I didn't own 12.5% of the company anymore, and we weren't hiring 2 business affairs lawyers anymore, and they wanted to change my title to be executive vice president. And I said to Jim, "I get it, Jim, I get it." And he says, "Oh, really? Great. Does that mean we have a deal?" I said, "No, it means that you're turning me from the president of the company into the business affairs guy. I don't have anybody else to work to do the deals, so I'll be stuck doing the negotiating. I don't have the title of president. I'm not your partner anymore." And I stayed at RKO for another, 2 years until I went to ABC.
Does that type of thing happen often? Just like it seems like it does, all the reneging on what was promised?
I would say that Jim Robinson was probably it was more prevalent to him than to other people. Jim and I stayed, Jim came to me when I was at Showtime after Joe Roth left later that year to be president of Fox.
Okay.
To run Fox Studios. I had a brief conversation about joining him there, but awkwardly, RKO was in negotiations with Fox to co-finance movies, and I had just been in a meeting with Ted Hartley and Barry Diller about co-financing movies, and I couldn't then go meet with Barry Diller to interview for this or to be approved for this job, having just sat there and extolled the virtues of RKO and why we'd be a great partner. So Joe hired a guy instead named Strauss Zelnick, who is a greatly talented exec and has, grown companies since then. Joe Strauss and I had spent 10 days together in Cannes in the spring of 1988, the 3 of us, right before Joe got the job offer. So it's, we went to the gym together every day. And so it was an interesting time in my life. But
you didn't go down to like the major league set at all, like really, or do anything.
I had nothing to. They started the movie after I left. I had no involvement. I didn't ask them to give me a credit. I read the script. We had a discussion about whether we thought this was a good movie. What would the foreign sales be? Could you sell a baseball movie overseas, which is problematic? If you can only make it if you get a certain level of actors. That if the actors were saleable, no matter what they were doing, then you could sell a baseball movie. It's so interesting.
That never didn't occur to me, and you're right. I didn't think about that aspect, and you're 100% right. That this is the place that it's played, and
I've made like 6 baseball movies. When we went to the Hall of Fame, I went with my wife. There's probably The only place I've ever been with her that I wished I was with somebody else, like my kids.
Who cares?
She
Right, who cared about
she
baseball?
had no interest. The only thing that she was interested in was a League of Our Own. They had like a permanent exhibit of
Right.
League of Our Own, but outside there, they had a list of all the baseball movies that had been made, which wasn't complete, but they had 60-something movies there,
Wow.
and 5 of them I had made that were on that
Wow,
list.
that's fantastic.
And that she was very impressed with. And then she went out and, to look in the little shops on Main Street in Cooperstown, and I spent the time alone. And I have to go back there. I want to take my 10-year-old grandson,
Okay.
or my granddaughter and my grandson, who are avid Yankee fans, such avid Yankee fans that the name of their dog is, Jonathan?
Don't say Mickey or Mantle, either one. So.
Yankee. Their name of
it is
their
Yankee.
dog is Yankee.
Okay.
It's all 3 of my kids know not to. My boys go back and forth during the
I want to
games
say
and
social
talk to each
services
other.
should get involved for child abuse.
So, no, they sat on, at 3 and 4 years old. It was COVID time. And once we were able to see each other, they'd sit on the couch with me, wrap one under each arm, and we'd watch the Yankee game together. And when a Yankee hit a home run, they ran the bases around the couch. They ran the bases.
Funny. That's cute.
So now my 2-year-old grandson runs the bases also. But I said to my sister, he's running I said to my daughter the other day, because they sent us a tape of him running the bases, and the Yankee game wasn't even on. And I said, Sammy, he's running in the wrong direction. She said, just leave him alone. He's, he turned 2 in March. He has time to learn which direction he's supposed to run.
My kids are so well trained. First of all, I said, like, if they commit a murder, I'm still going to love them as a parent. If they marry a Yankee fan, they're not welcome in the house anymore. So, and it got to the point my daughter did check before she got married. She did check with her fiance if he was a Yankee fan or not, because it was important. So.
Well, my daughter's married to a guy from Chicago, loveliest guy you could ever meet, and he's not an avid fan, so he doesn't watch Cubs games or anything. And if I'm over, now that they let the kid look at the screen on occasion, I can turn the game on. But of course, they don't have the right app to get all the games. So most of the time at their house, I can't get the game, so I just watch it later.
I can't do that. I know people who do that. I can't do that.
Oh, I watch all the games later, and I don't know what they are because I can do that. My wife's not interested. I'm not going to take 3 hours. I now am watching games in 55 minutes.
Right. Yes. No, but I have to check the score.
I can click and catch every single pitch in the game, and I miss a lot of what they're saying. If their conversation sounds interesting, I'll slow down and listen to them talk. Michael Case from the Bronx also. He seems like somebody I should know, but I don't know him.
He gets on my nerves.
But I did make the Joe Torre, movie Curveballs along the way.
Well, I got to ask you.
And there's a picture from Joe thanking me.
Oh, is it?
That little wall up there as well.
Well, I had Joe as manager before, when he still was not good.
Before he became a winner.
Right, exactly. So I got to ask, because you last time we never got to. There was one story that you said that you had about Pam Grier, and we didn't get to it last time, and I got to hear it this time. So I got to hear the Pam Grier story.
I don't know Pam Grier's story. I don't know what Pam Grier is one of the great actresses that I worked with. She's very talented.
Yes.
She worked on the first series that I made at Showtime, something called Lynx. And, it was fantastic to have her there because she was just such a great dynamic beauty in those movies that she did, Foxy Brown and the like.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Here she was a glamorous, Washington insider, basically, and who frequented this bar in lengths that the show was set in. So such a different view of her. But after that, she was in a movie with Danny Glover that we did, and she worked with us on other things. I just was going through, as we were downsizing the house and moving into this place and giving away a couple of thousand books that had been through the fire and covered with soot and ash, but they'd all been cleaned, but we didn't have room to keep them. I kept all the ones that Pam gave me each year for Christmas/Hanukkah that are all had beautiful inscriptions to me. I guess the problem what I might have been thinking about is that just we had worked together enough so that when we were doing the L Word, which you missed in my introduction as one of my shows.
That is true. Yes,
no problem.
And I watched both of them. I watched Queer as Folk.
I was out the door before the L Word premiere.
That's what I remember. I remember that you said that.
But I spent my last day at work at Showtime on the reshoot set of the L Word down at the beach in Santa Monica. But that show was very, very important to me, brought to me by Eileen Chaikin, who'd written a great movie for us, and I asked her what she wanted to do next, and she said, I want to develop this show about lesbians in West Hollywood, and I said, go do it, and it was around the time that we were going to premiere Queer as Folk, So
you greenlit L Word before Queer as Folk even premiered?
No, I greenlit the pilot for it before Queer as, while we knew that Queer as Folk was going on the air, but
you didn't know how it would do yet. So that's
we didn't know how it would do yet.
Right. Oh wow, that's so interesting. Okay.
But it was only a commitment to a pilot for somebody that we knew well, who was a great writer, who had made a great movie for us, and the movie that Eileen wrote for us, which has tremendous relevance even today, 25 years later, we premiered it in Washington before a bunch of congressmen, was about the healthcare industry, and based on a true story of a doctor at Humana, who was in charge of making sure that they turned down 50% of every claim that came in on a daily basis, and finally got sick of having that job and became a thorn in their side, and how they worked to keep her from being able to get another job. Her name was Dr. Linda Pino.
Incredible.
And it was the movie was called Damaged Care. And Eileen wrote that movie, and we got close out of that, and I liked working with her, and at the time, my number two, Mark Zachrin, liked working with her, and he was replaced by Gary Levine, who then held the job for the next 24 years and retired last year. He's my college buddy and my buddy from my freshman basketball team. Although I think I said this in the other podcast, that he was much more interested in the theater business at that time than in basketball. So he quit the basketball team. I had no idea I was going to follow this path, so I stayed and kept playing basketball. I had no idea at all. So, it's some things make total sense that, that's what you end up doing in your life. Some things you can see the connection early on. In my case, I thought I was going to be working for Ralph Nader, working on public interest law and trying, I had no interest in working for Alcoa, who had polluted Lake Michigan. I wanted to be the guy who was suing Alcoa for polluting Lake Michigan. And while I was in law school, a case came down that made it much, much harder to bring those kinds of class actions. There was a Supreme Court decision that changed the parameters of putting those things together. So it looked like that opportunity was closed off, and I wasn't interested in being on the other side. And I'd watch my parents struggle sometimes to, pay some bills. I wasn't interested in, doing being a public defender, although I was interested in the idea of it. But I wanted to do something where I could make money. I'm freely admit to that. And one of my friends said to me, well, you read 2 or 3 books a week, you see 2 or 3 movies a week. I'm going out to work for a firm in California where we represent Barbra Streisand and the Rolling Stones and Johnny Carson. And I said, oh, there are lawyers that I never thought about that. And I never interviewed for a job to do anything except to be an entertainment lawyer. No other kind of work interested me. I got 30 turn downs out of 31 firms that I interviewed with for my second year in law school.
Amazing, yeah.
Because I spent my first summer after law school in the Catskills, but we'll go back to that. That's a big part of my Jewish lens story. And I got an offer to a lot of them told me that, they had like a 2-man entertainment department. And they didn't see why they should hire somebody for the summer when there wasn't going to be an opening when I graduated in what I wanted to do. It made sense. And the lot of the bigger firms said, well, you've never been to California before. Do you really think that, you're going to pick up and leave your family behind, and come to California and settle? And so they told me that, I was invited back to interview for a 3rd-year permanent job, but they didn't want to waste the summer spot on somebody who was going to work for them, have a fun summer in California, and then go back and work in New York. But one smart firm, Loeb and Loeb, took a chance on me, offered me a job at the end of the summer, not in the entertainment department, and I deferred my acceptance, and I was interviewing for clerkships with judges, and about 2 months after the deadline was December 15th, in February they called up and said, we have several new clients in the entertainment department. We need not only you, but your colleague Phil Gross to start immediately in September. When can you get here? They said. They went from saying there's no opening to when can you get here. Phil Gross, by the way, was the guy who was negotiating for Jim Robinson in that failed Morgan Creek negotiation. He went on to be the managing partner of Loeb and Loeb.
Oh, okay. So, all right, I still have to get back to the Pam Grier. So what happened with Pam Grier then? So did you have something?
Okay,
Yes.
so when we were doing the L Word, they cast Jennifer Beals as the lead and the one name actress she was
great in that show. She really was. Yeah.
So Jennifer is biracial, and they wanted her to have a sister, and they're like looking at names, and they're saying, well, and then people looked at Pam Grier, and actually. Originally, she wasn't going to be Jennifer's sister, as she turned out to be. In the pilot, she was not Jennifer's sister as we shot it. She had another character. She played some offbeat character, but I called her up and said, it's not that much of a role, but it'll help us to launch this show if we can have Jennifer Beals and Pam Grier in it. And would you do it? And she said, yes, Jerry. I said, well, let me send you the script and read it, because it's really a kind of weird part. And it was a weird part. We cut it all out and Eileen Chaikin reshaped the story to make her Jennifer's half-sister. And then she had a real part in the show. So the Pam Grier story is really about, we were a family at Showtime. We had we worked with a lot of the same people over and over again. Bo Bridges, who I need to call and postpone tomorrow's dinner with, is the one person that I'm most in touch with. He worked with me 10 or 11 times, but
I'm going to remind you about Bo Bridges every time you mention him. So,
I asked him. I asked him. And, he and Lou Gossett were in a race as to who had been in the most things with me.
Oh,
Each
really?
one of them did like half a season in a series for me. Lou did it in Resurrection Boulevard. Bo did it in Beggars and Choosers. But they each did like 8 or 9 movies.
Both fantastic actors, yeah.
Yeah, well, that was the privilege of the job.
Yeah.
The reason that we got the talent that we had to do those movies, those 300 movies, is to be the star of a theatrical motion picture anymore, but they had been the star of that, and it was if your job is to make people feel that they're missing something every week if they don't have Showtime,
Right. Okay.
the best way that I figured out to be able to do that was to put John Voight on and Sidney Poitier on and Sally Field and Holly Hunter and Bo Bridges, and one movie, because it was his pet project, Jeff was in the movie and produced it, the Hunger movie that we did that Bo got nominated for the Emmy for, and work with, get as much press and publicity and noise around it, and so have people say, gee, maybe I should have Showtime when they get their Sunday television supplements. And that was what was on the other wall in the gym, was 65 weeks that I did my job right, because when they put your show on the cover of the supplement, it means that in the view of the editors of that newspaper, the guy in charge of putting that Sunday TV guide out, which I don't think exists anymore, but it did very much.
I used to live religiously by the TV guide, yes.
Yeah. So, if you get to cover it, you must have the most important show on TV. And we were only in 7% of the homes when I joined Showtime and 14% when I left. If they give you the cover of the guide and 86% of the people who are buying their paper in the audience don't even have Showtime, it really must be the big thing. And so that's what we did. We worked with, great quality people on quality projects, writers, directors who couldn't get them done at the studio. It was modeled largely after, what Harvey Weinstein was doing at Miramax, who, as hateful a human being as I found Harvey long before his troubles surfaced. I think he's the greatest figure in the film business since the 60s. He was a genius.
I have a close family member who worked for Miramax, and they used to tell me some stories. So, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Just continuing on, going back to my life, after I dropped out of Hebrew school, a semester shy of the valedictorianship, I went to the Bronx High School of Science, where there are a ton of Jewish kids. I went home every afternoon to play basketball. I was too short and too fat to play for the high school team. But we would go down to the playground, and generally myself and 2 or 3 friends, and, we would play 2-on-2 all afternoon, and then we'd go to the night center at night. But if there were like 3 of us, we would frequently have a game with a couple of the Irish kids that lived in the neighborhood. Not one time in the 10th, 11th, and 12th grades did the teams get mixed. Even if there was even if it was clear that the score of the game was going to be 15-4 or whatever, there was no mixing. And, I had several, at 11 and 12 and 13, I'd had several harassing incidents
Oh, really?
where I'd been harassed. But this was just another form of it. They weren't interested in let's mix the sides up and play a competitive game. It was let's beat the little Jew boys at 15-4. And you know, and I have to say that, you know, I know a lot of people now who tell me that they grew up, Jewish guys my age, never had experienced anti-Semitism in their life. So they're not really sure of what it is. But growing up in Parkchester, I did, you know. And, you know, there was a time where I would go over and babysit for my sister and brother-in-law who lived about 250 yards away across one of the little grass ovals that was in Parkchester. And I'd go out the back door of my house and there'd be 3 or 4. I was like 12. My nephew was a year and a half. And it would be just after dark. And there'd be 3 or 4 or 5 guys sitting on a bench right there. And you know, they'd throw matches at me, lit matches as I walked by. They would block my path. So, you know, there was like a triangular patch of grass with little chains around it. And they would block the path to the left, which is the one that led to my sister. So I had to go around the other sides to get past them. And, but one time, they actually, you know, the 4 or 5 guys knocked me to the ground. And so my brother-in-law, who's now 87, and his brother decided that the next time I babysat, they would lay in wait. And it happened to be a rainy night, and I had an umbrella, and these 4 or 5 guys are sitting out in the drizzle. I don't, you know, they were probably 14, and they came at me in the same manner, and my brother-in-law and his brother jumped out, and let's just say those guys never bothered me again.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
But, you know,
well deserved.
And, you know, and then there's one other similar story that has a different and better kind of happy ending. When I was about 15 and I was going on my first dates, I was in 10th grade, 14 I would have been, and I would come back from the train station, which was about a 3/4 of a mile walk back, and Parkchester is a beautiful development. It's you know, grass and ovals and big round circles, and you weren't allowed to walk on the grass, and there was all little chains around them, and they had little pocket parks set all over. And that age, in those pocket parks on a Saturday night, there'd be 10 or 12 guys with a case of beer, and 2 or 3 times they did target practice with the beer bottles on me walking down. And about the 3rd or 4th time that it happened, somebody looks up and he goes, wait a minute, that's Jerry. And a 6'5", 240-pound guy comes lumbering across the little park to me, and he was Tom Kerrigan, who rode the bus with me to Bronx Science every day. Didn't go to Catholic school the way the rest of them did. When he finished 8th grade in Catholic school, his mother made him take the test for Bronx Science, and he'd already been there. And he was in my English class and my math class in the 10th grade, and we rode the bus together, and he and I became friends. And from that day, nobody ever threw a beer bottle at me again. They would wind up to throw, and one of them would say, wait a minute, that's Kerrigan's friend Jerry. And then they would wave to me.
Unbelievable.
Occasionally, they'd come over and chat with me. They'd offer me a beer. And just by being Tom's friend, I was safe, at least in that corner of the neighborhood, that I went regularly back and forth through if I was going to the bus or the train. I had to walk
Unreal.
right past there. So I'll fast forward my last Kerrigan story. I'm at Orchard Beach in the Bronx, sometimes called Horseshit Beach. But it was a nice place, and my friends and I went there regularly. My buddy Shelley Rabinowitz, who's now the COO of the Wiesenthal Center and had been the CFO of Sony Pictures and other jobs. He and I went regularly. He had his license. He was a year and a half older than me. We went regularly from high school to the beach, and then in college on vacations or, before the summer work started up in the Catskills. We would go to the beach until it was time to work on almost every day. And one day I'm at the beach and I'm just sort of looking out at the water, standing there talking to Shelley and my friend Gary, who was also my best buddy growing up. And all of a sudden I am eating the sand. I am flat on my face. I have been hit by a tank that has rolled over me. And then I hear cackling behind me, and I roll over, and there is Tom Kerrigan offering me a hand up. I hadn't seen him in like 3 years. It was probably my junior year in college. I hadn't seen him since graduation. That led to us going out drinking, once a month when I was in law school for a couple of years. And then we lost touch when I moved away. And I looked Tom up. And sadly, he died 3 or 4 years ago, so I never was able to reconnect with him. But, that was my first Irish friend, to be followed by my roommate, O'Leary, showing that coexistence is not only possible, but I trade emails with, we have an email group of 8 people, 6 of us Yankee fans, that trade emails back and forth every day, not just about the Yankees. And we have reunions. We're going to have one in July. And O'Leary is O'Leary and Billy McGowan are 2 of the 8 in the group. And so that early experience with being harassed by kids who were taught from their first day that we had killed Jesus. I actually, going back when I was in 2nd grade and my sister started kindergarten, and I think the last time I said this story to her, she had no recollection of it, but I had a recollection of it, and I talked with my mom about it. She used to play with a girl named Margaret Hickey, who lived in 7E. We lived in 6E. Certainly on rainy days when you couldn't leave the building, Margaret was a year older than her and a year younger than me. And when Margaret went to kindergarten, a year ahead of my sister, and the next rainy day came and my mother suggested getting the girls together, Margaret came down to our apartment and she said, "I can't play with you anymore." And she left and walked, because you killed Jesus. That's what she told my 4-year-old sister. When she was 5 and I was 6, and they didn't play together anymore. And that's where those basketball games where we couldn't change the sides and the kids sitting on there. It was okay. It was okay to harass me because we were the people who killed Jesus. So incredible. I don't blame any of them. I blame the church teachings at that time that didn't make it clear or had an agenda or hadn't modernized. We're talking 1959, 60, that when that incident with Margaret Hickey happened. And she, we were polite to each other in the elevator after that. Her brother Jimmy and I spoke frequently. He didn't seem to have any grudge. Her mother, I think, was a nurse. She certainly was free of that by the time she was an adult. But in the kids that were instilled with that, we were an enemy. And I grew up in a neighborhood where that happened. We just
No, it's terrible right now. Let me ask you something. 'Cause I'm curious on this same subject a little bit. Do you still do you still intend or are you interested in doing other film production in the future or no?
yeah,
I'm just curious if you.
I am. I spend 5 to 10 hours a week trying to get something done. It's not enough, but it's all I'm willing to commit to because it's very frustrating. Again, if I said this in the last conversation, I'm sorry for repeating it, but it's a good story. I made a series with Brandon Tartikoff, one of the two great geniuses of the television business that I had, named Brandon, that I had the privilege of working with, Brandon Stoddard and Brandon Tartikoff, and they were friends because they had the same lawyer, the dean of one of the two deans of entertainment law, Ken Zifrin, along with Bruce Raymer, both of whom I had the privilege to be represented by. And Bruce was president of the AGC for some period of time, and Kenny's father was the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, but Kenny's the one that taught me the television business. But so through Kenny representing both Tartikoff and Stoddard, one who ran ABC Entertainment and one ran NBC Entertainment, and once they were out of those jobs, they were able to pursue a friendship and have lunches together. And I was, in the 4 years I worked for Stoddard, I was invited to those quarterly lunches, and that developed a relationship with Tartikoff. And I developed a show with Brandon called Beggars and Choosers about the television business. And Brandon knew that I had an ambition to work, as hard as I could for 10 years to make this work. And then at my 50th birthday, I was going to walk away. And that's pretty much what happened. But Brandon said to me, and I was halfway through at that time, it was August of 98. I didn't know that he was sick. He died 2 weeks after this conversation. He probably went to the hospital 2 days after. We had greenlit a series for him. And he said to me, Jerry, when you leave this job, get out of the business. And I said, what do you mean, Brandon? He said, well, what's the name of the show? I said, come on, you know the name of the show. And he repeats himself, so I say Beggars and Choosers. He says, what's it about? I say, well, you know what it's about. What's it about, Jerry? I say, it's about people who do the job that you used to have at NBC that I have now. He said, right. You, Jerry, don't have the temperament to be the beggar, and you'll no longer be the chooser. Just get out of the business. So every time I try and convince a 28-year-old who's done nothing of the merits of a movie I want to do, having made 80-plus Emmy-nominated movies and 2 Oscar-nominated movies, I'm reminded of Brandon. It's in my head almost every day that I try. But we did sell. My partner is Felicia Henderson, who was the showrunner on Soul Food, and George Tillman, who created the original movie and has gone on to a big film directing career. We did sell 2 years ago a reboot of Soul Food to Netflix. After Felicia and I first met in March of 2019, after I'd had 2 surgeries within 8 weeks, and I decided I could either go back into the business having done nothing for 5 years, or I could mull how crappy my health was, and I decided I'd prefer to talk to writers and directors again. So I called her up and I said, I want to reboot Soul Food, and we had a couple of multi-hour lunches, and we came up with a pitch, and we were scheduled to pitch it to ABC in the summer of 2019, when we got a call the day before the meeting that we couldn't take the pitch meeting from the Fox Studios, where Felicia had a deal, and conveniently they were the people who owned the rights because they'd made the original movie. And the reason that we were given, that they gave Felicia's manager, was that they didn't have the rights, that Showtime owned the rights to make another series out of Soul Food. And I said to Daryl, who's also my partner on the Soul Food Pitches, who's Felicia's manager at the time, they could say that, tell that story to anybody in the world, and they might believe them. But I personally am the person who negotiated with the chairman of Fox, Bill Mechanic, to get those rights. His wife was my senior VP at the time, and I know what the deal was. And we made a one series license. And if we stopped making episodes for more than a year, we had no further rights to do anything. Everything else belonged to the studio. And a year and a half later, they came to the same conclusion. So then we started all over again, trying to make the deals to develop the show. But we sold it to Netflix 2 years ago. And Netflix and Fox spent all of 2024 negotiating with each other on that deal. And in early 2025, they said they are unable to come to a deal. And so 7 years later, Felicia and I may have come across an opportunity to pitch one of the networks that passed, the same week that Netflix said that they wanted to buy it. So I am going to be calling the studio literally this week to say we want to set up a pitch with buyer X. And then, I have a script that's sitting over at CAA. That's a fabulous script about a battle between Joe Mankiewicz, legendary writer-director, who was head of the Directors Guild at the time of the blacklist and fought a huge battle with Cecil B. DeMille over whether people should sign a loyalty oath, originally written by a Mankiewicz. And I gave it to some agents at CAA that I know, and they loved it, and they gave it to someone, Brian Lord there, who represents him, and the script's been sent to George Clooney, and, it's the kind of thing that he could and should do, and I've said he can direct it, he can star in it, he can be the producer, he can do whatever it is he wants, but I'm not getting that kind of period story done without an elephant on my side.
Okay.
And so, I have some other scripts that I'm working on that are similar. Whoever plays the part is going to get nominated for an Oscar, kind of 3 or 4 things that I still, I've never had my name on an Oscar-nominated film, and I'd like to before I'm done. But I'm 72, so, the time is running out. So, going back to the Jewish aspect, you'll note that I am sporting my Haydn Hotel cup. That's where I met my wife, working in the Catskills. That's where Shelley Rabinowitz, that I referred to before, met his wife. We actually have 7 of us here in Southern California that worked at the Haydn Hotel, but in 2021, we got a few of the New Yorkers to join us. Most of those people were friends of mine, either from high school or from college, that I got jobs there. Alan Zverin and Shelley were my high school buddies, and Alan went to college with me and was the captain of our freshman basketball team. By the time I got to college, I'd grown 4 inches and lost 50 pounds, and so I had to play. So my great jump shot was able to show itself a little bit because I could also now run up and down the court. And Louis, who dated my wife before I did, came up to be my busboy. He was also on the freshman basketball team with us, and so he worked at the Haydn Hotel. And Pam's cousin Jonathan. So here's a good story for you. It's how I almost got fixed up with my wife, who I met both at the hotel and then when she went to SUNY Binghamton to Harper, But even earlier than that, Labor Day weekend, July 4th weekend comes, and Pam's cousin Jonathan comes up to start working in the hotel as a camp counselor, and his mother and grandmother get seated at my tables. And they're there for like a week. And his grandmother was kind of crotchety, to say the least. His mother was also kind of crotchety, but his mother decided that I would be perfect for her niece. But she wasn't sure if I was Jewish. And I can hear them, and I had at that time about a 60-70% ability to understand Yiddish.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I hear them saying, is he a shagitz, in Yiddish, and then I turned to them and I said, "Verstehst besser wir reden," which, do you know what that means in the Queen's Yiddish?
My Yiddish is so poor. I know certain words.
Okay, so what that means is I understand better than I speak. And his mother looked up and said, at that time I was completely blonde, and very suntanned, and so looking that way, it was
had a nice Aryan look.
Yeah, it was understandable that there was some question. So the aunt looked up and said, "You're Jewish." So by the next day, she had said, "I've got a niece for you," and I told her. And she was talking about my wife, and I told her that I thank you very much, but I could find my own dates. And a month and a half later, my wife showed up because they needed another camp counselor. Her cousin Jonathan called, and she came up in August. But she was with the high school kids, and I was with the group. The waiters and busboys were all people with 1 or 2 years of college behind us, and the groups never missed. But I noticed this great beauty across the room, which was a tremendous enhancement to the camp counselor group. And 6 months later, I'm taking my sister to orientation. My sister graduated a semester early from high school, so she was now just a year and a half behind me. And we go to the orientation, and this girl comes up to me, and she says, "You probably don't remember me." But I said, "Oh, sure I do. You're Jonathan's cousin from the Haydn." Of course, you could not, if you were a red-blooded 17-year-old at that point in time, you could not have noticed Jonathan's cousin from the Haydn. And that my sister and she became friends. And during that year, Pam dated 2 of my friends. And the next summer, we all went back to the Haydn, with her dating Louis, my basketball teammate. And I had my girlfriend from Binghamton, Mindy, come up to be the lifeguard. And by the end of the summer, those relationships had broken up. And by October, I asked Pam out on our first date. So we were friends before we were
romantically involved.
Exactly. Those were the words that I was looking for. Very tactful of you.
Well, there's something that a movie based in the Haydn is right there for the making.
There has been a movie made in the Haydn. It's called Sweet Lorraine. It stars Trini Alvarado and Maureen Stapleton. It was directed by the son-in-law of the owners of the Haydn. Mm-hmm. It is shot in the Haydn, and it is far more authentic of the experience than Dirty Dancing, which I have to say at RKO I turned down because I found its treatment of the kids who worked for the summer to be offensive. They were all spoiled brats, and it was done from the point of view of the townies, and we were all rich kids with fancy cars and convertibles, which couldn't have been farther from the truth. We were scraping by on the money we made at the Haydn was our spending money until the next summer when we went back to the Haydn. And so those were great days, and we're still a close-knit group.
I think a movie called It Happened at the Hyatt is there for the making. Now I'm going to have to write that book.
Well, this is the Jewish lens, but I believe that I probably am the person in the world who's made the most Holocaust movies.
Well, let me, because that's
Well, I've tried that. I tried that for several years. I had a partnership with a very important guy in Jewish history in LA named Phil Blazer. He was basically the leader of the Free the Soviet Jews movement, along with Zev Yaroslavsky, who was a major figure in Jewish LA as a councilman, and Phil went on to start JLTV, which you can find on DirecTV. And I was on the board of that. And Phil is the person. I got an award from the Yad Vashem that was instigated by Phil, probably now, I want to say like 2010, so 15, 16 years ago, for the contribution I made to preserving Holocaust history. Phil and I had a script along with a guy named Branko Lustig, who produced most of Spielberg's movies and definitely produced his Holocaust movie. The three of us had a script about we had two Jewish-themed scripts that we never got done. One of them was about the Israeli pilots taking out the Iranian nuclear reactors, 25 years ago, whatever they had. It was Top Gun. It was a real life Top Gun. And the 8 pilots who went and the secrecy of the mission. And we ended up in a fight with somebody over the rights. The guy who had put up the money for the script, wanted $1 million as a producer fee. And we were trying to figure out, that was a big movie. We're trying to make it for $25 million. And we had a lot of the building blocks put together, but there was no way we could accommodate this guy's demands. And so we ultimately dropped that project. The other project was an Operation Rescue kind of project about saving the Ethiopian Jews and them sending a plane and the trek that they had to make 400 miles from where they lived up in the hills to be flown out on that plane. And
so there was a movie that was that, and so did you had that in first? You had that movie?
I don't know if it ended up being the same script or not, or if it was the same story, because I never saw the one that got done. But those were the two that Branko and Phil were interested in, and I spent probably 2.5 to 3 years working on those. I remember going to the deli with the guy whose family owned the rights, and trying to say, look, we all want the same thing, and, but you're never going to get rich off of this thing, and you've got the script frozen. This is not something you do for that. And the guy was the guy who had put the money up was a big contributor to Jewish charities. So he was just badly advised. It was
the Red Sea diving resort.
Yeah, and it was so. So I stopped banging my head against the wall at that time, and I stopped really around the same time trying to get anything done until, as I said, in 2019, I made a comeback, if you will. But
which are the Holocaust documentaries that you did?
Well, they're not documentaries. They're we did The Devil's Arithmetic, which is a very well-known
Jane Yolen movie, right?
Yeah, very well-known book. Kids read it in the 7th and 8th grade. It's a fantasy story about a girl going back in time from her Passover Seder. It was brought to me by Mimi Rogers and Dustin Hoffman. Mimi played the girl's mother in the movie. Kirsten Dunst played the girl. We got multiple Emmy nominations in the family movie category. Dustin introduced the film on screen, and it was a giant success for us. And we did benefit screenings for it at both Milken School and at Valley Beth Shalom. Then we did, so let's go back. It's my first day at Showtime. I'm 40 years old, a month past my 40th birthday. I spent the first week, it's the week, 2 weeks after the earthquake. I spent the first week at this television convention in Miami, the NATBE convention, where the head of the William Morris television department told me that they don't call, in their staff meetings, they don't call us Showtime, they call us Slow Time, because nothing ever happens there, you know. And that was a guy named Sam Haskell, and about 5 years later, Sam and I became very good friends. We had dinners with our wives. We lived about a mile apart in Encino. And Sam said to me, you know, Jerry, we don't call it Slow Time anymore. You know, I'd probably made 150 movies by then and done the Outer Limits and Stargate. But so that's where we were starting from, that the head of the TV department at the biggest agency, you know, said, when we think about who to go to with a project, we don't think about you guys at all. You're like not even on the list.
Wow.
But we didn't make movies. We made like 2 movies a year, and we made one six episode series of Fallen Angels. And I had a different business plan. And in the peak years, we made 61 movies one year, 25 for the movie channel and 36 for Showtime. And we made 200 episodes of 9 series. So it was not Slow Time. Not Slow Time anymore. But on day one, sitting at my desk, I have this pile of mail, you know, like this high. And at the bottom of it is a hardcover book called Rescuers, Portraits in Moral Courage, written by Malka Drucker and Gabe Block. And I went through all my mail, and, you know, I gave it to my assistant to, you know, send replies to whatever notes there were. And I took the book home with me. And I was so jazzed up about my first day in the office that when Pam went to bed around 11:30, it's rare for me that I don't fall asleep in a second, and I still do right now. But that night I opened that book, and I read about 40 of the stories in there until about 3 a.m. And the book was dedicated to Rabbi Harold Schulweis. Rabbi Schulweis is one of the great figures of conservative Judaism. He is the rabbi who came out and said, I don't want to be part of any movement that excludes gay people. He did that in a Yom Kippur sermon. It was on the front page of the New York Times, that one of the 3 or 4 most influential rabbis in the country had taken that stand. It was based on the fact that a mother had come to him after her son had committed suicide and said to him, Rabbi, my son thought he was an abomination. Is my son an abomination? And the rabbi went through that, and he came to the conclusion that God makes all individuals, and that if God made you that way, if it was in your nature to be that way, then that is who you are, and there is nothing abominable about that. And from that, he took the stand, and he started the foundation with his brother, either his brother or his cousin, I think his cousin Harvey Schulweis, Foundation for Christian Rescuers, and he started the Havorah movement. Rabbi Schulweis was a legendary figure who happens to have had his first job out of rabbinical school was at Temple Emmanuel of Parkchester, where I grew up, in one of these great coincidences. And when I told my brother-in-law, 30-something years ago, we were joining this temple, and this is who the rabbi was, he goes, "Oh, you mean Harry? Harry was the youth leader at Temple Emmanuel. My brother-in-law is 15 years older than I am." And so he was a teenager when Rabbi Schulweis showed up there. So this book was dedicated to him. He inspired these women. He had founded the Christian Rescuers Foundation, And he inspired these women to write this book. And I decided that day that I now had a job where I had the power to try and get this thing done. But I needed an elephant to do it because I'm not in the, as my boss Matt Blank reminded me frequently, Jerry, you're not in the home movie business. We have to be able to draw an audience for what you want to put on the air. So I went to CAA, and with the help of an agent named Brian Sibrel, I reached out to Spielberg, but he had just done his Holocaust movie at that time, and they didn't immediately respond. So he said, "Who's next on your list?" And I said, "Barbra Streisand." And within a month, I was having lunch with her producing partner, Sis Corman, who was a powerhouse of a woman. Just she wanted you to know how tough she was from the first meeting, and probably given the way business and society treated women, way back when Sis got her start, she was in her 60s when I was in my 40s. She might have even been 70 or something. And she and I hit it off. And she said, "Wait, Jerry, give me time. I will talk to Barbara about it. I will introduce the subject matter. Don't rush me. If you want to move on to somebody else, you can." I said, "Sis, nobody else will be able to do this. The rights aren't going anywhere. It's not like the book's in high demand. We want Barbra Streisand." She said, "What do you want from her?" I said, "I want her to come to the premiere. I want her to introduce the movie on the movies that we make on the air." And it took over a year. And Sis gave me fabulous tickets to see Streisand down in Anaheim when she played there. And one day she called up and said, "Barbara is," and she has to take executive producer credit on the films. And she did all of those things. And so the movies are introduced on the air by her. Oh. We did 6 stories. I got Peter Bogdanovich to direct 2 of them. One of them went on to win the prize. So they were hours. So they're not movies and they're not television episodes. They're sort of a complete story. We centered them around 2 couples, 2 women, and 2 families, each of which were stories of rescuers. So with the families, they had the kids and the husband and wife and the kids involved. With the others, they were just couples without kids. And the first 2 that we put on were the stories of 2 women, all taken from the book. And of course, we premiered it in the Motion Picture Academy for 1,000 people. 300 or 400 of them were Valley Beth Shalom members. I went to Rabbi Schulweis and Rabbi Feinstein, who's a very good and close friend of ours, who bar mitzvahed all 4 of my kids plus my wife, and has married my first 3 kids, and will preside in September over the marriage of the last kid. And I said, I want to do this as a fundraiser. Here's 400 tickets to the premiere. Sell them for whatever you could get for them. And, the temple made, I don't know, $25,000, $30,000 or something. But that was, and we did that, when we paired the 2 movies up. So we showed 2 of them at a time. And Barbara came to the first 2 of those screenings. I don't think she came by the time we did the 3rd one because they were separated out by months. She ducked in as the lights were going down, took her seat, and so we did those. And out of that grew the fact that we were open to doing Holocaust Christian rescue stories that were outside the book. So we did the story of Varian Fry long before that television series that was done, a couple of years ago. Bill Hurt played Varian Fry, and Lynn Redgrave played Alma Mahler, who was married to Franz Werfel and Mahler and a 3rd composer. And it's an important part of the story. She was very much the European society dilettante Jewish woman. And Alan Arkin played the forger. Julia Ormond played the woman from the rescuer committee that worked with Bill Hurt. And we premiered that movie at the White House.
Wow.
At the White House. Barbara is an executive producer. Also, Prince Edward Wessex, King Charles's brother, who wanted to be in the movie business, is a producer of that movie. Became a good colleague. We did 2 movies together that he and Barbara Streisand are the executive producers. Imagine the Prince of England and Barbara Streisand. If your job is to make people feel that they're missing something, do you imagine how much publicity you can get by having those people there? People want to write about it. We had art. They didn't just review the movie. There were feature articles about how did you get Barbara Streisand. They never met at the premieres that she didn't come to. The Prince was there from England. It was held at the LA County Art Museum, and it was a must-have ticket. People wanted to be there so that they could say they were with the Prince at the movie premiere. And he is a terrific guy. I have been out of touch with him for 20 years. That was a contact made by Sam Haskell, who obviously had gotten over our slow time thing and put me into business with, and Sam visited him at the castle many times and invited Pam and I to go along. And Pam said, we're not going to the castle. And, 15 years later, she said, we should have gone to the castle that time we had the chance to go. But we're just plain kids from the Queens and Brooklyn and the Bronx. And that was just the idea of going there was, although we'd been to the White House. And so, Barbara promised that if Al Gore won, we were going to premiere the movie at the White House. The director of Varian was one of Hollywood's leading Republicans and had worked very hard for George Bush. And he promised that if George Bush won, we were going to premiere the movie at the White House. And a few months into the term, like April of 2001, Pam and I and Matt Blank, my chairman, and his wife, trekked off to the White House. We had to send them how much we weighed in advance because they then knew how much the car weighed, and they would then know if there were any extra weight in there in checking for bombs. It's an interesting side note of going there. We went to the White House and premiered the movie. Abe Foxman was there from the Anti-Defamation League. Bruce Raymer was there, who was then the president of the AJC. So we got the first cabin, important people in American Judaism were there, and that was it. There were like 12 people there. And George Bush was as gracious as you could possibly be, and remembered in conversations that he had after the screening 2 hours later, he remembered every detail that you had said to him beforehand. He said to my wife, so how did the mother of 4 enjoy the movie? Because she had said we had 4 kids early on. And it was a once in a lifetime experience.
Absolutely.
And never thought, at SUNY Binghamton, as a 17-year-old kid playing freshman basketball, that I would be and the second movie we did was another fantastic experience. The one that was a rescuer story that because it was a very different kind of rescue, and it's an important one. We did a movie called Out of the Ashes. It stars Christine Lottie. She plays Dr. Gisela Pearl. Dr. Gisela Pearl is a very famous gynecologist and obstetrician in New York in the 50s, 60s, and into the 70s. But in 1944, she was plucked out of Hungary by the Nazis and interned at Auschwitz and put to work with Mengele.
Oh my gosh.
And what she was supposed to do was examine women that were not being sent off to be exterminated to see which ones were pregnant so that Mengele could have more people to do his experimentation on. So anyone that she found that was pregnant, she told them to meet her in the latrine at night. And she performed more than 1,000 abortions in Auschwitz.
Oh my
When,
gosh. Wow.
when she came to America and tried to get her license, some survivor came forward and said she's the abortionist of Auschwitz at a time when abortion was illegal in New York State. And so they appointed a 3-person medical review board. And I picked up the phone to Bo Bridges and to Richard Crenna and to Bruce Davidson, all of whom I had were part of the Showtime family. And I said, I need you for a week to be the 3 doctors that are the commission that
Tribunal, basically.
the
Yeah.
tribunal, and they
Yeah.
all said yes. And so after we finished shooting in the Hungarian portion, and I went,
Wow.
fortunately for me, the closest I ever came to being beaten by the Nazis was I happened to be in Vilnius. We shot the movie in Lithuania, and I happened to be in Vilnius with our multi-Emmy winning director, Joe Sargent, and my colleague, my SVP, who was there as our production rep, Joan Borstein, when we shot the scenes of the beginning of the end for Jews in Hungary. And the Nazis stopped cars in the middle of the street, and they just started attacking people walking down the block with batons and hitting them over the head. And so I spent 9 hours watching that be redone from every angle. And then I went off the next day. I got the VIP tour of Vilnius, and I went to the Paneri Forest where there are 30,000 bodies buried. And I went to the grave of the Vilna Gaon, and and it was. But that was what convinced me that once I had retired, that having made all these films, that Pam and I needed to go to Auschwitz, which we subsequently did on a tour.
I'd still like to do that. I interviewed someone from March of the Living. That's still on my wish list to do one day.
Yeah.
It's amazing that you went.
Yeah. I mean, my two younger kids had done March of the Living before we ended up going there. It said if Sammy and Max can go and take it, then we can go and do it. So we did a 13-day European tour. Right. Very, beautiful tour with a company called
Very emotional, sure.
But one of the days was a day at Auschwitz. And, but I'll tell you, there's a beautiful story. So we're at Auschwitz. It's 4:30 in the afternoon. We've been through the buildings, where the administrative stuff was and where the oven was. Right. But now we're down the road, about half a mile away, is the other part where they had the barracks, most of which were horse stables. And there's like one stable preserved that they had 200 people sleeping in this place. And the tour guide starts talking to us, and they'd split us into one group was outside walking along the tracks, and one group was listening to the tour guide, and then we were going to switch. And it's getting to be sunset. It's October, so it's around 5 in the afternoon, and it was Sukkot. And all of a sudden, while the tour guide is talking, we hear singing. And then we realize that we're hearing Hatikva being sung.
Oh, fantastic.
And so everybody kind of deserts this tour guide and drifts outside from the stables and looks towards where the sun is setting. And coming out of the setting sun are 20, 15, 16, 17-year-old Israeli kids who are there for the vacation for Sukkot. They're 9 days off for Sukkot. And I'm far away, but the first group, they've already joined up with them. We had 36 people on this bus. So the first 18 or 20 people have surged around these kids, and they are singing along with them. And then our other group of 16 or 18 people join them, and we all said Kaddish together there. And there were 50-something people, all the kids and all of us, everybody was in tears. And we were at the graveyard of Jews, and we were seeing the rebirth at the same time. It was the closest to a miracle that I will ever experience. Watching those kids coming out of the setting sun was an image that could never, ever have been. If I did that in one of the movies, people would say, that could never happen like that. And they would, I read all the reviews saying, they so schmaltzy and they made it up and whatever it is. And
that's beautiful. That really is beautiful.
Yeah. So that's, it was, I led a charmed and privileged life,
You've had an incredible life, Jerry. You've had so many amazing experiences.
Just one or two other little things if we're doing my Jewish biography, my Jewish film biography. So in the year that I was leaving Showtime, shortly before I left, my partner, who I mentioned before, one of my two number twos in LA, Mark Zakarin, wrote a script. He had left us 3 years before in his early 50s and had retired, and he wanted to be a writer, and he worked the first year on the L Word as our straight male in the room to sort of give all the women there a perspective. But he wrote a script, and it turned out to be a movie that he raised most of the money for, called Keeping Up with the Steins. We compared it to It's My Big Fat Jewish Bar Mitzvah instead of My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
That name sounds familiar. I'm going to have to look that one.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen it, you should. It's delightful. I have the strangest of my credits on that. I got executive consultant because the executive producer slots were filled, but my greatest contributions to that movie were getting Gary Marshall to play the grandfather, even though he's not Jewish, and Richard Benjamin to play the rabbi. Richard had directed for us the Neil Sobel.
I love Richard Benjamin. Love Richard Benjamin.
He's a wonderful man. He was everything. He's everything that you wanted to work with. Oh, I have a Richard's Jewish story also. So I also, showed up on the set a couple of times when they were having trouble with one of the actors as sort of an authority figure or a former authority figure, because I was no longer president of Showtime. And we took that movie to the HBO Comedy Festival, crazily enough, and it won the first prize there.
Wow.
And out of that, Disney made an offer for its Miramax division. Harvey and Bob were gone already, but the first movie they bought after Harvey and Bob left was Keeping Up with the Steins. And I remember Chris Albrecht saying, no wonder we didn't ever, he was the head of HBO, we never invited you, Jerry, to the festival. You guys are such rude guests that the first time you Showtime guys show up, you win the grand prize at the festival. He and I laughed about that a few other times down the road. My sister ended up working for him for a couple of years. She's still at Stars when Chris was the chairman there, and he turned out to be a great mentor for her, along with Carmi Zlotnick, who really was her mentor and whose kid went to Jewish day school with Sammy. So, the Jewish connections go deep. But Richard Benjamin and I had another movie that we actually got financed. And go back to the Jim Robinson, does it often happen that you shake hands with people and then they renege on you? The answer is sometimes it does. So there was a film producer that when I was at Showtime I helped him out on 4 or 5 movies. He had made movies that he thought should go out theatrically. He had financed them. He was in the foreign sales business. He had most or all of his investment covered by tax deals and whatever. And then he decided that he couldn't get enough for them, and it would be more prestigious for them to premiere as a Showtime movie, since we had elevated the level of that. And so I bought those movies from this guy for $500,000. And one day he said to me, Jerry, what would you like to do? Anything you want to do, we'll do it. So I gave him a script by this Canadian writer about that was called Hidden. And he said, I love it, Jerry. I cried at the end. It was so powerful. And I brought in Richard Benjamin, who was going to direct it. And the guy said, we make this movie. So after the we make this movie meeting, we put together cast lists for the movie. And we scheduled 9 meetings with Mr. V Make This Movie, and every time within 24 to 48 hours, the meeting was canceled. He's gone to Cannes, he's gone to here. The last meeting was not canceled. We double-checked 3 times. I'm sitting in my car on Wilshire Boulevard outside this guy's office, waiting for Richard to call me that he's parked and we'll walk in together. We're going to have an in-person casting meeting, and we're going to make pay-or-play offers to the actors. And the meeting was 10 o'clock, and at 9:45, my assistant called me, Judy, may she rest in peace, and she said, you're not going to believe it. Your meeting was canceled. I said, Richard is in the parking lot. I know, Jerry. I have to now get out of my car, tell Richard Benjamin that we've been shit on again by this guy. And
oh my gosh, wow.
So I know that this was 2005 because my kid was playing in the Maccabee games. And I get a call from this guy while I'm in Israel, my one and only trip there. We were there like 21 days. And when are we going to meet to talk about the casting? I said, we'll meet anytime you want. You know, I'm in Israel. Are you in Israel now? We'll get Richard on the phone. No, I'm not in Israel. You know, are you in France? You know, I'll fly to France on my way home. And, and that's the last time I ever talked to the guy, because Judy spent a month trying to set up the next meeting, and we couldn't get it done. About a year and a half later, I ran into this guy. I'm walking with one of my best friends, John Turtle, and we're walking to the American Film Mart. And John and this guy embrace, as is the Hollywood custom of people who've known each other 20, 25 years. And the guy goes to embrace me, and I go, you have to be kidding me. You have to be kidding me. He goes, what, Jerry, what? I said, you remember that movie, Hidden, where you jerked us around for a year and you embarrassed me in front of an important director and whatever? The movie got made under a different name. It got made by Agnieszka Holland. It was nominated for the Oscar. See, this was my chance. That's why I'm still going. This is how close I got to having my name on an Oscar film. It was made by Agnieszka Holland. It was nominated for the foreign language Oscar. And Richard Benjamin and I had nothing to do with it. I did get gracious calls from the writer when it was happening. He did offer to, put me in touch with the people who were financing it so that I could get re-involved, but there was no place for me in shooting it in Polish.
Oh my God.
And so, I'm graciously not saying this guy's name, but those of Hollywood in the know, how's my Israeli accent? Does it sound at all okay?
I'm going to ask again, rhymes with, but I will let it go.
So that's my other Richard Benjamin story.
Oh,
but Laughter on the 23rd Floor was essentially a Jewish movie completely. It was about the Sid Caesar writer's room.
Yes.
You know, I happened to represent for 5 or 6 years of my career as a lawyer, Larry Gelbart.
Oh, wow.
I did a
Okay.
series with him that he co-created with his stepson created, and he came on and executive produced. I have beautiful silver picture frames that Larry gave us when my first two kids are born. So I had a very personal interest in doing that story because I knew Gelbart, and I had also made, at that time, 2 Neil Simon movies. And I'd had lunch with Neil a few times. And I had worked with Anne Bancroft, and Mel Brooks had come to dinners when we were shooting those movies. So I actually knew personally 3 of those writers in the room. I never met Woody Allen, but it's the greatest collection of writing talent.
I love Woody Allen. Love Woody Allen. Yes.
In the history of showbiz. And
absolutely.
We did get an Emmy nomination for Best Picture for it. Nathan Lane played Sid Caesar, who I hear is knocking it out of the park as Death of a Salesman, although I asked somebody the other day, is it better than the Brian Dennehy version, which I filmed and put on Showtime, and Brian won the Golden Globe for, and we won the Producers Guild for Best TV Production that year. So I'm dying to see it. So that's another, that's not a Holocaust film, but
I would closing it on 2 hours now. So I would wrap, but Jerry, I would love to just go down name after name after name with you, and you could tell these stories another time if you're up for that.
I'm totally up to look. I am looking for the writer who wants to write the memoir for me. I've decided in the last 6 months that in doing these podcasts helps me to crystallize the fact that as I said, I've led a charmed and privileged life. I'm hosting a Loeb and Loeb reunion luncheon, which I do twice a year, of the lawyers that I worked with. And I left Loeb and Loeb in 1985. I'm hosting a luncheon in June 3rd, because June 2nd will be 50 years that I started working at that one firm at 31 that took a chance on me.
Wow.
And just realizing, everything that happened. And, I have to be careful about the stories that I tell about my law career, but I've actually consulted with people on that. And, I have cute little John Wayne story that's about a minute long, and a 3-minute Diana Ross story, and my racquetball game with Brian Wilson as a summer clerk as a 22-year-old kid. We represented him, and the senior partner has me playing racquetball with Brian. And, I had died and gone to heaven the second I got to the entertainment department, because the first 8 weeks that I worked at that firm, I did no entertainment work. And so only the last 2 weeks, I waited. The last 2 weeks of the summer was what I was there for in California. And even in that period of time, I was sold. I was totally sold.
I'm speechless with a lot of the things. But all right, I definitely want to go back and talk to things. But
when you're in the music business, the series business, and the movie business, the way I've been,
right,
you run across a lot of people.
Well, we're going to have to pick this up to be continued. But Jerry, well, thank you again. I'm like stunned, but thank you again, and sincerely. And I always like conversing with you anyway. Even when the emails that we exchange. But no, seriously, thank you again. It's been so much fun hearing all the stories, and we will pick this up again. And we'll talk to you when we get off.
Okay, let me just say that there's one thing that I need to do before I finish this thing, because all this is all about me and the stuff that I did and whatever it is. And I have to end it the way I ended any speech where I got an award. So on the business side of it, especially the Showtime side, I had three partners, Mark Zacharin, Gary Levine, and Ann Foley. Ann was in New York. She handled the family movies, for which we won 7 years in a row for Emmy for Best Picture, and had a 19 out of 20 Best Picture run. And she also handled Matt Blank Management, my boss. She's perhaps the greatest colleague I've ever had. And then Mark Zacharin and I and Gary Levine and a guy named Mark Pedowitz, who went on to run the CW for 10 years. We were all at ABC together. We had a 2-on-2 basketball game every Wednesday, 4 Jewish guys from the boroughs. And we all went on to big, big jobs. But Mark followed me 2 years after I got there to Showtime and stayed 5 years. And then Gary followed me for the last 3 years and stayed another 20 years plus beyond me. And Mark and Gary, you know, they were my friends. And somebody said it to me yesterday. In fact, a writer that I worked with, very important writer that I'm still working with, Felicia Henderson, said to me last night, it was great to be in a casting session with you and Gary, because if you disagreed, it was nobody trying to prove that they were bigger or more important than the other. It was clear that you two guys were friends, and this was a disagreement between friends. And the same thing she said about you and Mark. And so I owe a huge debt to those three people for everything that got done. And then, of course, I owe everything to Pam. 4 beautiful kids, 4 beautiful grandkids, amazing kids. You know, I mean, and, you know, 3 great in-law kids who are my kids. So I have 7 grown children and 4 little ones, and I'm about to get my 8th grown children and a superstar new daughter-in-law.
Mazel tov.
Who's heavily involved in the Jewish community. And you know, one other story. Once Rabbi Schulweis knew me, and by the way, when Mark Zacharin did Keeping Up with the Steins, and I was involved in that, I went to Rabbi Schulweis and Feinstein, and they looked at the movie, and they thought it was a message that should get out about how to conduct a bar mitzvah. So they wrote, the two of them, to 600 rabbis on our behalf. And you know, of course, Eddie Feinstein is a personal friend who we have dinner with and mutual friends. Rabbi Feinstein was up here and, you know, in his early 80s by then, but he remembered that I was from Parkchester, where his first pulpit was. And when he would pass me in the hallway on Saturday morning, he didn't say, "Hi, Jerry." He'd say, "Hey, Parkchester, how you doing?" So even in the hallowed halls of Valley Beth Shalom and Encino, you can take the boy out of the Bronx, but you can't take the Bronx out of the boy. And that's a fitting place to end where I started.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I will say thank you one time, but I really do. I like you said, I love hearing.
It really is 2 hours.
Yeah, it goes fast.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do guest lecturing at, you know, law schools and film schools and whatever, and the classes are 3 hours, and I can just fill the whole 3 hours.
I can hear stories there. I love hearing these stories. I love hearing the behind the scenes and like stuff, and you've had such an incredible career. It's just fascinating to hear all the things.
So next time we'll talk about things that are, you know, not part of the Jewish resume. And
no, I love hearing the films.
Whenever you want.
Well, let me set this up. Again, this has been The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen. Again, a very special thanks to Jerry Offsay. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thanks for tuning in to The Jewish Lens, where all items used was strictly kosher.